my mom was screaming at me, "Tell me your name, demon." And I just remember sitting there thinking like, oh shit, like I don't know any demon names. And if I did, would she know if I was lying? I just want this experience to be over. But ultimately she says, well, you want to keep your demon, so you're going to stay possessed until you're ready to let go. And it was the first time in my life where probably the deep rooted fear built.
Today we're joined by a remarkable individual whose life journey is a testament to transformation. From the highs and lows in the wedding industry to confronting deep personal shadows, she emerged empowered and enlightened. Now, as a certified human design reader, galactic astrologer, and more, she guides others to live their true essence, breaking free from societal bounds. Please welcome a beacon of resilience and empowerment, a guide to finding one's authentic self, Cassandra. Cassandra, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Beckett. I'm really excited to have another conversation with you.
I know we've had many, and I'm so excited to have you on my podcast and be able to really share more of your personal story, because I think it's an integral one and pretty cool. So let's just dive right into it. And the first question I want to start with you is, in your journey, you were in the wedding industry, right? And so how do you go from the wedding industry to becoming like this empowerment guide? You know, was there a pivotal moment that sparked this? Like, hey, I'm going to shift and I'm going to do this. Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so yes, there was. I had worked in the wedding industry, as you said, for 10 years. I did 4 years photography, and then I did like rental and design. My stuff was even in Martha Stewart, and I've been published. Did floral design exclusively for 7 years. And it was in many ways, at least I thought, wonderful. I was making the 6 figures. I had a reputation. I mean, what else could go wrong? But my upbringing had conditioned me to sort of, the wedding work, I'm a creative and it comes pretty natural to me. So it was like the one thing I felt like I was doing right in life. And so it was like I threw my everything into it, absolutely everything. And I exceeded expectations, busy all the time, would not sleep nonstop. And my body hated it. My mind hated it. It was high stress work. I honestly didn't see any change in that at all. I was good at it, and I put the foundation and the work in, and it was something that I could have just continued to succeed at. I received one in my 10 years of doing this work, a negative comment. And that like flew me over the edge. And it was like this moment where I couldn't even realize the why I was so fixated on my work, why I burnt myself out. But this one moment was kind of like a little break in which I did some reflection. Do I want to be here? What is going on? My body, my mind, like, what am I doing to myself? And a month later, I had a spiritual awakening during a solar eclipse, which was in a predominant placement in my astrology chart. And so, gosh, I've been asked so many questions about my awakening experience, like if I've done work before or entertained, spirituality, or was working on myself, or, self-help books, or, all these things. But really, I did nothing. My work helped as a Band-Aid to cover up for the numbness, the shadow of my upbringing and the challenges that I just felt like I constantly lived my life trying to outrun. And after my awakening, it was just like, mind blowing. I went to sleep one way, woke up the another, and people who were around me, who had worked with me, saw me, and they were like, "You feel so different. Who are you? You talk about things like you've been studying them forever." And my husband, everybody that knew me was just kind of left with like, "Who is this person?" And from there, it just was this desire to figure out what the hell happened. So I
Yeah.
learned more about astrology, which led me to human design, and that led me to gene keys. And that's led me here to where I am now with taking it further with galactic astrology. And so it was just like this domino effect that was rapid, accelerated awakening of all the pieces, all the parts in a hyper intense time frame.
So when
Yep.
you talk about, and that's unusual, right? Because I know a
Yeah.
lot of people, they're kind of already on that path. I know for me, I was already kind of on that path, you know. So for you not to be, what was when you talk about your upbringing, right? The conditioning from the upbringing,
Yeah. Yeah.
where speak a little bit about that, because where were you
Yeah.
coming from?
Absolutely. So I was raised in what I call a religiously abusive home that was very high control. And so
Okay.
I use the word religiously abusive because there's such thing as, I believe, the challenges of religion as they are, feeling like you innately are not worthy, that the authority must come from, some sort of patriarchal source outside of yourself, and especially women in the church.
Yeah.
There's a lot to what it's supposed to look like, what you're supposed to be. But on top of that, I lived with what I believe to be narcissistic a mother, and dysfunctional as it is, home environment, and religion was used as a tool for manipulation, from as simple as, my mother would say, "The Lord told me you shouldn't be with that person. The Lord told me that friend
Wow.
isn't right for you." And I wanted to make mom happy. I don't want to burn in the fiery pits of hell. You're supposed to obey your parents. And so obviously my mom had some like amazing connection to the Lord that I didn't. And so like I listened and I obeyed and I tried to do everything right and what they wanted, and it was never good enough. I picked up a few tools from her as well. Like, one, I can still remember one relationship I was in. I was like, "The Lord told me that we're meant to take a break, but this isn't the end." Never heard another thing from me. But it's like, yeah, you rope God in and you're like, "Oh yeah, the Lord told me." So there was that, and there was more extreme cases, such as, in my early youth, teenage years, my mother tried to cast out a spirit of lust out of me. We sat there while I was curled in a ball, just crying, because if you've ever seen, a deliverance, which is like when you're casting out demons, if you've
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
seen that environment, it is very traumatic to the vessel. And my mom was screaming at me, "Tell me your name, demon." And I just remember sitting there thinking like, "Oh shit, like I don't know any demon names, and if I did, would she know if I was lying? I just want this experience to be over." But ultimately she says, "Well, you want to keep your demons, so you're going to stay possessed until you're ready to let go." And it was the first time in my life where probably the deep rooted fear built, because I was in that moment, no matter what I wanted, no matter how I wanted to please her, no matter how I wanted to be free from whatever this demon may have possessed me, because like I don't want to be, do you want to be possessed with a demon? I
No.
know I sure the
No.
hell
No.
didn't. And it was like it was like a moment where it's like, what you desire, what you feel, what you want, she
Mm.
knew better, and I would have to just live with this. And I lived most of my life in so much fear. I'm like rapture, post traumatic stress syndrome is absolutely a thing where you like wake up and if no one's there, you're like, oh my God, did I miss it? Was I not good enough? I mean, and so it just
Wow.
kind of ruled my life. And while I would love to say that I had some sort of like realization to snap me out of it, it wasn't until I was 41 and had my spiritual awakening that it was like this unveiling that was so magical of releasing all of that fear. And in so many ways, it's brought me closer to the concept of a God source than religion
Mhm.
ever did.
Did you ever feel like, I mean, I can't imagine thinking, right? I'm young and I've got this demon that's in me. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And as you're growing up, like, right, she obviously, like, fine, your demons are going to stay in you. Like, was there a point for you as you're getting older in your 20s or something where you're thinking, okay, the fear is there, right? We understand that. We understand how the subconscious works in the mind.
Yeah.
But did you ever have a moment where you're like, I don't have a demon? Do you know what I mean? The fear is still there,
Yeah.
or did you not? Did you just carry that on, you know what I mean, subconsciously until, like you said, your awakening? And then how do you live your life? Like, how does
Yeah.
that infiltrate,
Yeah.
right? Your relationships, your friendships, your
Yeah.
like, I, I don't know. I could, I'm like, I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm struggling
Yeah.
even to find the words
Yeah.
to ask that.
And sadly, I believed it. I mean, I lived, and that's just why I love where I am today and why I feel like you'll hear me talk so often about how wonderful we are and embracing our authentic self and trusting the journey, because I didn't have that realization. I lived my life feeling constantly unworthy. On top of that, I'm very sensitive. So ever since a young age, I've had night terrors, and I would see things and things would happen to me. And so I honestly, as far as like how it affected my relationships and, life, it's funny how our shadows, they find us. I ended up living on my
Yeah.
own. I chose a job in customer service where my job every day was to go get yelled at and try to reach unreachable standards. And I was like, that sounds familiar. I would come home, cry. I didn't do well living on my own. Who I was dating at the time didn't feel comfortable moving in with me despite my hopes for some security. So I had trouble. I had trouble sleeping. I had trouble being alone. I had trouble with my job. And it was like, even though I felt like I was leaving that environment, I carried all of those same messages with me, which is why I think it's so important for us to understand our soul's journey, who we are, where we come from, and some of that, yes, can be healed or worked through mindset. For me, I had to do a lot of physical, like I had someone that worked with me with the body with yoga to kind of like, still there was so much held in my system from the experience. But yeah, I lived in so much fear. Yeah, I remember I got a dog at the time. I'm a crazy cat lady now, but I got this adorable little Dachshund. And it was funny because that's a story too, because, I'm trying to detach from my toxic home, but yet I ended up like having to have this expensive dog that I was like, asked my mother to and father to credit me to purchase this like expensive dog I didn't have money for my no pets allowed apartment. Um, and this dog was my security blanket. Seriously, every time I had to get together with my parents, I would take it with me and I would get yelled at and screamed at. And, I'm in my 20s and couldn't walk away. that dog ended up having like so many digestive problems, anxiety issues, behavioral problems. But I would sit, and that was my comfort. That was my thing. I needed to be on my own. I needed something there. That dog would sit and shake and shake and shake, and it was toxic. But it was what I needed, the only tool I knew to get by. So
Yeah.
yeah, it I didn't figure it out.
Well, it is crazy, like, and I know you've probably seen this and I have in clients, is how comfortable we get in dysfunctional situations.
Yeah,
Like, we logically know it's dysfunctional, or maybe even to some degree we don't, but we know we don't want it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's like, I know I don't want to feel this way anymore, but yet we go back to it, or yet we keep putting ourselves in those situations, even subconsciously, because it's like you said, replaying out, like you
yeah.
found a job where you got screamed at. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want this, but I know how to navigate this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you get comfortable in the dysfunction. And so, because what you really want is so unfamiliar that it's kind of like, whoa, I don't know what to do with that.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
how did you go through that and then end up in the wedding industry? Like, did this, because right there's like wedding, you're
yeah.
thinking white and love, and I've worked in the wedding industry, so there's a darker side to it.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't
I
know
did some
that.
videography for for weddings. I was a
I love
videographer.
it.
Yeah,
Love
and then
it.
I quickly exited because I can't deal with the
The
mothers of
app.
the brides.
Yeah,
I can't.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? There's a whole other level. So what drew you there,
yeah.
knowing all this? You know what I
Uh,
mean?
yeah. Okay, so Beckett, I think you're gonna love this. Okay, because you know human design. So I am a 4-6. Okay. I'm going to summarize this really short, I promise, but you have to hear the whole story. Okay. So in my life, going back to that dysfunction, I found that distractions were really good for me to help cover up once again, because that's what we're doing. Until we confront our
Yeah.
shadows, it's like we're literally living, finding ways in which we can sort of distract ourselves from dealing with the root of the problem. Okay. So got married, took a lot of convincing, but I eventually convinced him to marry me. It's like, there's nothing to worry about. Damn. Like, if you only knew the journey. But got married, beautiful distraction. I mean, a wedding, hells yes. Like, so much to like think about, plan, work on. Okay, so I did that. People would say, "Oh, you're really good at this." I ended up going, we almost got a divorce very quickly. Went to counseling thinking that this counselor was going to be like, yes, you guys should not be together. Instead, that was the first time anybody asked me about my parents, and I was like, why the heck are you asking me this? I'm nothing like them, but it ended up being 3 years in therapy, and the therapist said, whew, you got a lot of energy, you need a hobby. Which is hard to imagine me with like out anything. I mean, that's probably partly why we were in counseling, because I had to put that energy somewhere, So it's like, what are you doing? Can I come? And so she was like, get a hobby. So I was like, okay. So I signed up for I was like, blank canvas. Like, what do I want to do? So I signed up for a cake decorating
Right.
class because I'm like, I like cake, and I signed up for a floral class at a community college. Okay, so I'm a 4-6. Here's where the story goes. So I'm in the cake decorating class, and the instructor is like, "Oh my gosh, you are so good at this. Do you want my job?" Sure. Okay.
What?
So
Holy.
they put me through the training and like got me quick through, which I'm an Aries, I can do it quick, got me quick through.
Right,
I
right.
became a cake decorating instructor. My boss said, wow, you're really good at this. You're really creative. She was an event coordinator. She's like, do you want my job? Yeah, sure. So my first day of work, she was like, okay, this is painting, this is jewelry making, this is scrapbooking, this is I've never heard of scrapbooking in my life, you know. And this was my job now. Is
Scrapbooking. Yeah.
like boot camp for creative things. So I was the event coordinator of the store. I ran the events. I learned all the creative things. I was pretty darn good at it. I have actually been published back then. This was before Pinterest. I've been published over 7 times in pretty prestigious magazines for artists'
Wow.
work. And I ended up going down this road as an artist, taking picture of my stuff. Well, a fellow artist friend said, wow, you're really good at this. You should be a photographer. So I was like, sure. So I become a photographer.
Right.
Then I have another wedding. So now I'm in the wedding industry. And I have a friend that says, wow, you are so creative. Like the way you set up your photo shoots and do things, like you shouldn't be a photographer. You should be a wedding designer. Sure. And so 10 years later, 4 years wedding photographer, designer, florist. That's how it happened. 4, 6 right there. Stereo, you know, it's like your
Yeah, yeah. That's.
opportunities
I mean,
come from the people you're around.
I'm a 4-1, and I can't say I've had a path like that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like my path has been more like a zigzag. You know what I mean? Versus like, you know what I mean? Like yours is like boom, 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 boom. You know what I mean? Mine's
Yeah,
just been
it
kind
was
of like over
wild.
here and then over here and then yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But it's like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
wow.
it was wild. Yeah.
So did you even realize, like, was it even something that you were just like, yes, this is something I really want to do? Or, right, like from a soul level, because I imagine that's your work now versus, right, like we know, here's the next invite, here's the next
Yeah.
invite, here's the next
Right.
invite. And so logically, it just seems like this is where I should go. But now I'm 10 years later doing something that,
Right.
did it light your soul up? Did you love it?
I
You know what I mean?
loved,
Like you said, you were burnt out, you weren't
yeah,
working.
I loved making people happy. That's it. I was
Yeah.
really good at it, and people made me feel freaking awesome for what I did. And it fueled me. And it fueled me so much that, like I said, I lost track of, I mean, the one of my days that was like a breaking point for me was I woke up at 8 a.m. I had a wedding, and at 5:30 a.m. the next day, I sat on the couch crying. I still had an hour left of work for the wedding that day. I had worked straight through the entire day. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't. I just I could that's the shadow side. I feel like too that can be of a manifesting generator, is like
Yeah.
in ways I am a creative. Yes, that is who I am. It comes very natural. And I really loved when people were like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm blown away with, and there's so many other deeper levels I uncovered later, which one big of those was I did not have a good childhood. I did not have a good wedding experience. I did not have good memories. Making this magical day for other people so they can have that. And so, on a deep level, I realized there was a part of my soul that was feeling like I was getting that warm sensation of love and unity and connection and family, you know, by designing
Mhm.
and putting together these beautiful environments. And as a floral designer, one thing that set me apart is I was like, I don't want to just do your flowers. I want you to know your flowers. I want you to connect with them. I want them to bring nostalgia to you. I want you to smell them and remember them. You know, it was like I was like really pulling in the feeling aspect, the sensory aspect, you know. And also that works out great as an entrepreneur because yeah, I was a high-end wedding florist. My minimum exceeds what most weddings cost, you know, what they were, you know, the average was.
Yeah.
So it's like there had to be that value. And when you can share the importance of it, it really makes them feel attached to wanting those feelings that I was able to sell and, share. So,
I mean, yeah, that's a whole sensory experience. I mean, I don't even know of any, and I know some friends who are event planners and stuff like that, but especially from a floral standpoint. So you got all this external validation,
mm-hmm.
which I'm sure, right, which is interesting because, right, we're dealing with that right now with social media.
Yeah.
Let's face it, right? It's external validation. People are like, oh, I got 30,000 shares or likes, or, from
Yeah.
people who have really big accounts, or I have 10,000 followers. Like, this means something, but really it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So you had shared in the beginning that you got one negative review
Mm-hmm.
that sent you spiraling.
Mm-hmm.
And was that a moment for you to confront that shadow and realize, like, did you pause and go, I've had all these accolades, I've been written
Yeah.
up, I've been published, people love my work, and there's just this
Yeah.
one person who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't like my work, and they knocked me off my pedestal and spiraled. Did that wake up for you for your external validation of, like, this is not where I need to be?
I feel like you're asking me all these questions, and I would love to be like, yes, I picked myself up by the bootstraps and I realized I am awesome. Unfortunately, that was not my story. Sorry, Beckett. Um, no,
Oh no, that's
what
no, that's
happened? What happened was I had two weddings that day, and the one wedding was the largest wedding I've ever had to do. For anybody that is familiar with floral stuff, to put it into perspective, it was an Indian wedding. So it was like I think it was like at a Ritz something or another. I mean, it was a big deal. And I set up, I had two weddings done, and the other wedding was very valuable as well, but it didn't require as much work as the Indian wedding. So I set it up and I set some of my team to do the one, and the other to, I and about five of us went to do the other wedding. And I found out about this like literally 10 minutes before I had to arrive at the other wedding. Okay. So in that time, that day, and I had one of my friends at the time who had known me most of my life journey before marriage, many, many years. They watched me within and like less than hours, like completely degrade myself to nothing. Nothing wasn't good enough. I wasn't doing good enough. I was fooling myself. I critiqued every last thing I did at the wedding that I was at. I overanalyzed everything. And my friend even said to me, Cassandra, 7 years, you've not had anybody even remotely dissatisfied. And you're better than this. And I was like, I hear what you're saying, but it wasn't what I
yeah.
was feeling. After that, I completely withdrawed from letting myself be seen. I used to like post my work behind the scene. I used to talk about myself. All of a sudden, I was an imposter. All of a sudden, I wasn't good enough. But that's the thing, is it's like the universe sometimes, I think, sends us moments and it looks different for every person. For me, because I threw everything into this work, that was the thing the universe threw my way for me to realize something wasn't right. And I didn't realize what it was. Instead, I wanted to run and hide. I wanted to, I considered walking away. In that moment, I realized how I was being hard on my body, because that's the other thing about a manifesting generator is like sometimes something has to happen for us to like, we have so much go
Mhm.
power that we can go and then be like, oh yeah, I haven't eaten in 12 hours, when we're kind of plugged in. And so it was like, what am I putting myself through? And I tried for a month afterwards to kind of find my passion again for my work. Ultimately, after my spiritual awakening, I spent 9 months where I healed and perfected my journey, in the sense of I was able to completely detach from the stress of the wedding industry as much as I would think the average person, if not better than that, because it's tricky. I really found my footing and my grounding, and then the universe was like, way to go. It's time to move on. And the door was slam shut. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me about that. What slam shut? Because right,
Yeah.
you're 4-6, so sixes have that. You guys have those trials, right? You have those stages of your life of
Yeah.
like, this is going to be for better or worse, kind of a shit show right now. You know what I mean? Like this is just going to be a lot of lesson learning and figuring that
Yeah.
out. So once you got your footing,
Yeah.
then right now you found your pace, and now the door shuts.
Yeah. And that's why I knew I was meant for something else. I started to sense it. It started off to where I was trying to figure out how I can be authentic in the work I do. So I started to try to
Mhm.
want to coach or help or mentor, people that were in the same position that I was in the wedding industry, look at mindset to shift. And I actually had an opportunity during that time that I was able to speak at a fairly large company in the floral industry in New York. And that was when I found out I loved speaking. But I wanted to help people to see their worth beyond what they were selling. I wanted people to realize that you're not just a florist like this florist or that florist. And I wanted them to embody their
Yeah.
authentic expression and see how that contributes to who they are and what they're selling. An example of that for me was, that nostalgia, that sensory engagement that I pulled in. I was
Yeah.
able to be very nurturing and confident, that was supportive. Those are characteristics of me, of who I am, no matter what I do. And so I tried to kind of like dabble with that because it felt comfortable and safe for me. But then with the wedding stuff, it was like I had so many people, like they knew my prices and they knew I was consistent. Like you can see my work. I still have a lot of it up on Instagram. I was consistent. And I started getting all of these off the wall things like, yeah, will you do my wedding for like $1,000? Or it's like, yeah, I want all baby's breath. Don't like baby's breath. Not a baby's breath person. It smells like cat pee, and you don't want cat
No.
pee on your tables at your wedding. Don't kill me. I'm just being honest, okay? And I'm not kidding you. Like everybody that messaged me was like, I just want baby's breath. And even take it a step further, if they say red roses and baby's breath, oh hell no. Let's not go back to the 80s. It was like, so I started getting all of these things. I was like, did you not see my work? Like, it's, have you not, how did you
Right.
find me? Where are you like roping me into this individual that you think is going to do your wedding for $1,000 with baby's breath and red roses? Where am I failing? And so it was like all the like, I could have booked all I wanted for so long, and all of a sudden it was like a joke. I felt like my spirit guides were joking with me because they are a little sarcastic, and they're like, I can just picture them thinking, what are we going to do? Give her a lot of baby's breath. you know? And so I was like, yeah, no, thank you. Obviously, this door is shut.
So so the door shuts in two things, right? I would
Yeah.
think this also played into it is, and maybe you didn't, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Did you have to pivot then and really look at yourself and go, I need to change how I find validation,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like I have to, like, how do I find my validation within, especially on tough days?
Yeah.
Did that come up? And then being a four, was there another invite that was like, oh, hey, that door's closed. Let's go over here now because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't have that sometimes.
Yeah. 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 So I went through a validation withdrawal. Like I said, my guides can be a little snarky. So
Mm,
they kind of like threw me in the wilderness and was like, okay, girl, you got this. And I was like, I don't got this. And so I did go through a spell. I did go through a spell where I got wrapped up in coaching programs and things that I felt like,
mm,
because that goes back also to that A, validation, B, religious abuse. I'm like, listen, you
yeah.
give me that checklist, I will check those things off and I'll nail it. I'll be all the things. I was like, you just tell me. You just tell me. And the universe is like, they're not going to tell you. You're supposed to figure that out. And so I went through where I got wrapped up in coaching programs and then kind of like went through this spell where it was like I couldn't keep going down that path. And so I was like, all right, I'm here for myself. And then I'm like, okay, readers. But like there was no, like, it just wasn't opening up. I had to sit with myself. And I have had, ever since my awakening, I feel like a pretty honest, close connection intuitively to my guides. So I knew the things, I was working through it and I knew the things. And so I was like, okay, validation withdrawal, let's do this. And so I did. And it forced me to understand myself, to sit with myself, to under connect with who I am, and with that. And I did have some opening opportunities through the work I've done with different coaches or things. For example, as I am now with galactic astrology, it's very interesting because I started off with like a 9-month intuitive program, which was great for a skeptic. I'm just saying, because there's nothing like sitting in a group situation, feeling into mediumship
Yeah.
and intuition when all of a sudden you all are saying the same thing and you're like, I'm not crazy. Okay. So it was exactly what I needed. It was interesting though, because I got wrapped up into human design instead of fulfilling that call towards reading the Akashic records at the time, because I was still in that phase where it's like, am I crazy? Like, what does this look like? That's really out there. Like my religious upbringing didn't consider all of these things. And so there was that comfort zone where human design made my left arrows logical mind very happy. I enjoyed the system. And it was a great tool for me to get to know myself. So yeah, along the way, because it did come back around, to where I was given the invitation again to, go down the alien rabbit
Mm.
hole. And I back in the fall decided, okay, I'm for it. So yeah.
When did you make peace? Because I gotta believe, right? I know many people you've worked with, I've worked with. When people start knowing they have guides or getting messages, how were you able to really separate that from the subconscious of, right? I have demons.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
how do I know, like, how did you personally, because people struggle with that without the demon,
Yeah.
prerequisite, but
Yeah.
now you've got that. So I'd be intrigued to know how you
Yeah.
dealt with that.
Okay, so this is interesting. Well, first off, after my spiritual awakening, I did go through like a very intense religious deconstruction where it was like I
Okay. Yeah.
went through everything of like finding out what was what. Like, and my biggest thing I realized was like the biggest selling point, I guess you could say, for me is like, holy crap, there was 2000 some odd years of like cultural beliefs, the, Hindu, and Vedas and like all these things all happened way before Christianity even came into the like picture. And even the Bible was written 300 years after the death and resurrection of Christ. And I'm like, okay, so I thought
Right.
y'all were first, y'all were not first. And that was like, okay, so I want to know more with that. So it's interesting, it's going back to your question. So my strongest gift and what first came online for me is clairaudient. And so it's
Okay.
interesting because I don't know if you remember back in COVID where everybody was talking about like the whole inner monologue thing and everything. Like, do you have an inner voice? Do you not have an inner voice?
Mhm.
So I don't know what the right question is to that. I used to think I do. I used to think I don't. Now I've realized I just am that. I just am who I am. And what that is earlier in my journey of my upbringing, I had a constant negative narrative. Like if you could picture all the like crappy things you could possibly say to yourself, like constantly running through
Mhm.
so much that you can't even recognize what's what. After therapy, I lost the voice completely. So I would have said I had no narrative. And I didn't even know that was a thing because until like I was with some friends during COVID and they were talking about it. I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, what's in your head? I was like, well, what do you mean? And they're like, well, mine is like, I blah, 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 this. And you talk to yourself. Do you talk to yourself? I was like, no. And they're like, well, what goes on in your head? I was like, I don't know. If I have something to do, I might run my to do list. And they're like, okay, so you finish your to do list, then what's in your head? I was like, nothing. And they're like, what do you mean nothing? Like, what do you like if you, I was like, they're like, what do you do? And I said, well, I don't know. Like, if I don't have something to do, I like to sit in nature or sit and, I don't really listen to music in the car. And they're like, okay, so when you're sitting there, what are you saying to yourself? And I was like, what are you talking about? And and come to find out, I don't have that thing. And so I was like, well, I notice the birds, I'll hear them and I'll hear the wind. I'll notice the clock ticking. And I am a person, I love to sit in silence. And when I say silence, it is silence.
I do
And
too.
so that being the case, when the clairaudient gift came on, I was like, who's talking? You know, you said who, what? um, and so it started off small with like a few words. But that's where the group intuitive program was nice because like they would be like, oh, they're telling me blah, 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 blah. And they're like, what do you have, Cassandra? And I'm like, teacups. And they're like, and it was all relevant. Like, it would be something like, oh my gosh, they had this special moment where they enjoyed tea. What do you got, Cassandra? Pasta? And they're like, oh yeah, because they made pasta every Sunday and it was like this family tradition. It was frustrating at first. Like it was frustrating. But that's where it was nice to have someone help me through it. And literally, no lie, to the day, a year after my spiritual awakening, like anniversary, full-fledged on voice came online. And it was like, hi, Cassandra, da 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 da, and like all of these things of wisdom. And I was like, oh my God. And it's been like
Who's
that ever
talking?
since. So I go around and I'll
Did
be
you ever
talking to
ask?
people and say like, oh, they told me, and they're like, who's they?
Well, I was going to ask you that, right? Because for those that don't know, you guys watch or listen to my other podcasts. We've talked about this before, but everybody has gifts and they're
Yeah.
different clairs.
Yeah.
Clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant. There's tons of different clairs, and I'll let you guys look that up. That's another podcast. So, did you ever, once you heard this voice, I don't have clairaudient, although there's moments, mine's more clairsentient.
Okay. Yeah.
Just know what I know. I feel what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Although lately I've been asked to like scry almost in water.
Oh,
I
love
think
it.
that's the artist part. It's just visual. Visual
Yeah.
is coming through a lot for whatever reason. But interesting though, when you're hearing this voice, whatever this voice is, Do
Mm-hmm.
you like my first inclination would be like who are you and what's your name?
Yeah. Wow, that's
Like,
funny.
do you
Yeah.
do that?
No, I just feel like I have this inner knowing. I mean, I know it's my guides. I honestly, if I'm being quite frank, I think it's my higher self. Also, as my other gifts come online, I realized recently, part of, as a galactic astrologer, we're trained in dowsing. And I realized recently I used to be very verbal with all the things, and then I started noticing that when I was dowsing, it was responding to like my internal dial, like conversation back and forth with the voice. And the other thing is, when you know, the voice came on 1 year, literally to the date, 2 year anniversary, I started channeling light language. And when I was like, okay, this is new. And then the light language ended up having a channeled English interpretation directed towards me. And I can never remember. I need to record it because it's like I feel like I'm receiving it in the moment, my spirit, but I don't always remember the channeling. I feel like my journey will
Mhm.
be leading me towards trance channeling in the future, and I'm just sort of like, my guides have told me they will work with me, that voice. So that's where I say too, it's like I feel like it's my higher self, but also I know it's been like my galactic connections, or and I will get and ascended masters that will come through, and I'll be told to like call upon, and I'll have a name, and then I'll be like, I don't even know who this person is. I'm not calling upon anybody until I know what it is. So here I am, meditation, like all zoned out, and I'm like, okay, hold the phone. Have to look online and be like, who is this Tara person? you know Before I go calling her. And every time it's like an ascended master, and I didn't even know about them. So it's a wild ride, Beckett. It's a wild ride.
Can you explain to people when you say I'm dowsing or you're learning, what is that? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's pendulum work basically, but it's kind of like beyond yes or no. I have like in galactic astrology, because we pull out such rich storylines, we have to use a variety of different senses. I'm clairvoyant as well. I have the feeling, sentient, I believe. I've smelled a few
Yeah.
times, but it's like you're tapping into all of those senses. But I also love that logical side of me, is like I can use my dowsing charts to be more specific, pull out more detail, or further this story. So there, a lot of circular charts or half moons, to where it'll have like a variety of a variety of different things based on galactic astrology. The ones I use a lot are an alphabet chart and a number chart and percentage chart. So
Okay. And for those of you that don't know, a pendulum, if you ever go to a metaphysical store or any of those spiritual stores, it's usually if I had mine around here, I'd show you. It's a stone or metal, or there's all different
yeah, I
kinds.
don't have my
Crystal of some kind on a chain
yeah
that you hold in between your fingers, and it will swing
yeah.
certain ways, around, and
It's
it will
like
respond to you.
yeah
People will tell you, hold your pendulum and ask it a question, and it's different for everybody. I've only had a couple people, I don't know if you've experienced this, who I've taken to the store and a pendulum won't work for them at all.
Wow, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I know for me, pendulums, that's a whole nother story, because I feel like you have to be
right.
super responsible, and it's like the go-to for everybody is like, am I gonna get $1,000? You know what I mean? Like, there's a
Right.
respect. You have to build the
Yes.
relationship, and through galactic astrology, we're
Yeah.
actually taught like how to build that relationship. So like, I greet my pendulum, I ask my pendulum if it's fully charged, what it needs. There's a lot of work to that. Also, I wasn't taught this, but I just feel intuitively for me, I hold my pendulum from my third eye when I douse, which I've not yet seen that before, but
I haven't either.
it feels like it's a helps, at least for me, feel like I'm bonding that connection to my
Mm.
higher self and to the tool that is being used. And my I know it sounds crazy and really out there, but I have two pendulums and they have two different characteristics. They like to be charged different ways. One really likes water, the other one was like, put me in the ground. And so they are different. And they're great tools, but it's been something I've had to definitely get, build that relationship. At first, it was like I would ask all the questions that you shouldn't be asking, and you won't get on an authentic read. It is so important how you ask your questions with pendulums, or better yet, not even ask them and do yes or no, true, false statements. Yeah.
Yeah, that was something we were kind of brought through in school when I went to that,
Yeah.
when I was getting certified as a spiritual life coach, a little bit, because it is important how you, and I have two different ones have two very
Yeah.
different energetic frequencies. I don't use them as much as I used to, but to your point, yes, then everybody gets one, keeps it in their pocket, and you're like, should I date this person? It's
Yeah.
like, no, dude.
Yeah. Don't do that.
You know what I mean? It's just,
Don't
yeah,
do
it's a
that.
whole different ballgame. But that being said, what I would like you to do is explain to people, because I was new to this and it's blown me away. I've had a reading with Cassandra. I highly recommend it. But what is galactic astrology?
Ooh, I love it. I love it. Okay. So, galactic astrology is a unique way in which you can read your natal astrology chart to find out what your connections are to your galactic heritage, different star races. So, galactic astrology came from someone, Julia Blaz, who is a QHHT hypnosis practitioner, and through her work, she started to realize with her clients that there was synchronicities when they had certain lives as it related to their astrology chart. And over extensive amount of clients and times and years and, studying, she pulled together this information, and which is ridiculously accurate and so magical, in which we can now look at the fixed stars. And by understanding our galactic heritage, and when I say galactic heritage, just to kind of like summarize it, I look at everything as we had an original source energy. That source energy said, I wonder what it would be like to know myself. And with that power of thought, this source energy fragmented into different pieces. The first fragmentations were group consciousness, and then ultimately fragmented down to the I expression. And this all took place well beyond Earth was even in the equation. And so there are storylines when we talk about things like the Lyrans and the Orion Wars and the Dracos, and there's so many different things you could say. Ultimately, I look at it as, it's just consciousness figuring its way out, and so through this, knowing this information, we can look at a chart and we can kind of see our connections to the stars, to our, galactic roots. And so that is the general idea, but it's a very complex certification. As I said, we're trained as dowsers and we're trained in reading the Akashic records. So every practitioner is unique. For me personally, I enjoy to connect to the Akashic records, and we are certified as soul readers through the Akashic records. So I will connect there and download the stories in the past lives. And then it is so beautiful and magical because I can pull up the galactic astrology chart and say, oh, there you are in perfect placements. And it's fun for people who are familiar with astrology because then I can explain it also on that level of like, oh, okay, this story, look at this. It's in your 10th house. And here you were in these positions of leadership in this life and, the different connections. So it is a rich way to learn about you and your soul's journey. And I have yet to find a chart that what is uncovered did not reflect what was being experienced right now. So I love it. I love it.
So, for people that don't know, what are the Akashic records, right? Because for
Yeah.
some people, I mean, I know what it is. A lot of us in this community know, but for somebody who's first hearing this, for the first
Yeah.
time, they're like, "What are you talking about? What's an
Yeah.
Akashic record?"
Yeah. I
So,
love
can you
it.
give us a little explanation on that?
We're just covering all sorts of fun topics here, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. So the Akashic records are basically the energy that holds everything past, present, and future. And I love that we explored this, Beckett, on our podcast together, where we talked a little bit as well about this.
Mhm.
But yeah, you're looking at this energy, and what is neat is that you can look at this from a quantum perspective. But basically, this energy is a storehouse of everything. I love also looking at it too, which is interesting when we are learning about like from a human design perspective, like neutrinos or the idea of
Yeah,
that particle or matter that kind of like goes through retaining information or holding information. But most of the time when you hear people talk about Akashic records, they're going to tell you it's a higher dimensional plane. I know, I believe it's been said to be exist on like the eighth dimension, but the whole idea of dimensions can be cloudy. But essentially, it's this higher
right.
dimensional space in which all is held past, present, future, that you can connect with. You can almost look at it as everybody does it different. You can almost look at it as you're at a vibrational frequency in which you are able to connect um, and have these records accessible in order to read them. So it goes a little deeper, I feel like, than like if you were to, let's say, go do a mediumship reading. They're going to probably talk about your past relatives or your grandpa that's in the room.
Right.
An intuitive reading is a higher self reading, to where generally the guidance is coming from archangels or your higher being, and it's going to be sort of supportive and guiding. Where an Akashic record reading is where you're really going to explore your soul's journey, where you've been, what your lives look like. A lot of times, past lives readings will come out, or very rich information on your life purpose or your soul's journey. I hope that helps.
Thank you. That was a really good explanation. And that's, yeah. And I've had people say that, does everybody have something in the Akash? And I'm like, yes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You're a soul. So yes, you
Mm-hmm.
do have something. They will get something, unlike a mediumship where, you might, nobody from your
Yeah.
passed on relatives may show up and there
Yeah.
might just be an empty room. That's a possibility. So
Yeah.
I encourage listeners to really learn the difference between all these because it is important. And it helps to pick out what you're getting. I
Yeah.
have had, and I would ask you this too. What do you consider the biggest difference between a regular natal chart reading, which I've had, and I've also had yours, which is the galactic natal chart reading?
Yeah. Yeah.
What would
Okay.
you say is the biggest difference? And should somebody start with just a natal chart or can they just jump right in with you?
That's a really good question. So I would say this. I would say that if you resonate with the idea of being I know the term is star, a lot of people use the term starseed, but I use it as well just because it's a identifier that people can resonate or relate to. I feel like we all come from that original source energy, so it's I use it loosely. It's not like some people are anytime we're talking about the soul journey, I detach from any narrative that says like, well, I am a star seed, I am
Right.
we're all the things.
Like
We're
I'm
all
up
the things.
here
We've
and
been
you're
all the
down here.
things. We've been all the lives. You've been the victim. You've been the hero. You've been the bad guy. We're all the things. So but if you resonate with the idea of you're intrigued by the cosmos, you feel drawn to the cosmos, you feel like you're ready, like beam me up, I'm ready, take me home, any personality type that is like into the magical, the unexplainable, even topics like Merlin and Avalon and all those things, galactic astrology, like it will make you light up with all the information that comes forward. If you are very logical, or you love systems, you might enjoy starting with just a natal chart reading, because basically that's going to talk a lot more about you, your expression, your energy. I know there are people out there that do sort of predictive astrology readings. I personally have a different perspective on that. I feel like our soul is meant to go through the journey, and we're supposed to kind of like feel our way through to some regard. So I'm not an astrologer that you'll see me doing a lot of transit conversations. If I do, it's because I really felt called to it. So, but natal chart will kind of give you that beginner level of who you are. But if you have a relationship that you feel like there's a disconnect or something's missing or there's something challenging, do a galactic relationship reading. If you feel like you don't feel like you know who you are, where you belong, or things of this nature, you feel like the outsider, you feel like you don't exactly fit in like you would, I'd say go for the galactic astrology reading, because they will definitely uncover like very rich, detailed past lives that offer so much clarity on who you are and who your soul is and what your soul came here to sort of play with and experience.
That's perfect. Thank you, my friend, for sharing that,
You're
because
welcome.
I couldn't have said it as eloquently as you did. And I know that question's going to come up. So, and just so you guys know, I will also have Cassandra's information, where you can find her, where you can book one of these readings. All the good things will be in the description box below, or in the description on the podcast thing. So, wrapping up this, I could talk to you for hours. I mean, there's so many things and so many ways I want to go, but I want to ask you two kind of poignant questions to kind of bring things around
Yeah.
for your story, because I think it's important. And those two questions, we'll start with this one, is looking back at the version of yourself that you were when you were younger, where you didn't really know intuition, you didn't know about self-awareness, your identity really wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to her today?
I love that. And my answer is it's okay to just be. That is what I would say, because I feel like not only myself, but I think so many of us feel like there's a right way, a wrong way, whether it's through religion, whether it's through society, whether it's through our upbringing. We can get caught up in this perspective of this is what's acceptable, this is what is expected of me, this is the right way, this is what that successful human looks like, whatever you want to put the label on. But this goes against every fabric of what my intuition says that this journey is all about. And this journey is about experimentation and learning and evolving and growing and being present. And it's all good and it's all right. You're not going to miss the boat. You're not going to take a wrong turn. Whatever your path is that you're on, it is right where you are right now. And the fact that you may be called towards adjustment, that's right too. It's all right. It's all okay. And we, as I, lightly touched on earlier, I think also as humans, we want to just like, I'll be right when, it'll be okay when. I just need to this. And we miss out on life. We miss out on those moments and enjoy the ride. And it's okay. I to this day use this affirmation. I give myself permission to simply be. It's not about what I'm becoming all the time. It's not about who I was, but it's about the acceptance of this moment, because this is the moment that we have. And if we're always looking to the past, we're holding ourselves back. If we're always looking to the future, we're never becoming. So I give myself permission to just be. That is absolutely the advice I would give to myself and to anybody else listening, because I think that it is important.
That's beautifully said. I love that.
Thank
And
you.
I think it is key to do that, because we beat ourselves up too much. And the last question I'm going to start asking everybody, so you're the first one to get this one because I've changed it up, is in a world constantly seeking answers, what's the most powerful question you've asked yourself that led to a profound shift in your perspective or life's direction?
Oh, goodness gracious. I love it. And it's challenging all in one. Gotta give me a minute here. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna really absorb that one. Give it to me again, Beckett. Read that to me again. Let's hear it again.
Okay. Yeah. In a world constantly seeking answers, what's the most powerful question you've asked yourself that led to a profound shift in your perspective or your life's direction?
Yeah. Okay. I got it. All right. And it might sound basic, but what is your heart saying? What is your heart saying? Because, and I don't know, maybe that's the human design reader in me. But yeah, it's like getting out of the head, which goes into kind of like what I just spoke about a little bit, and like disconnecting from what things should or shouldn't be, and really connecting into the heart. But that's funny because it's easier said than done, and it is scary. Like, it can be scary to sit with what your heart really wants, what you really feel like you're being called towards. There's this magical element of surrender in that, and embodiment in that. And so but I think all those things are what bring us back to center, and because I believe that basically our heart, our feelings, like what we're drawn to, I believe that's the soul's, our higher self's compass. I absolutely personally believe that. I feel like that also is why we can't get it wrong, is because if we're trying to look like that, stable, stagnant, this is what it's supposed to be, then we're kind of like forcing against our heart. But if we reconnect with our heart and allow the journey, the experiences, we're naturally evolving and growing. And I think that's why we're here. So that's what I would say is, what does your heart want? What does your heart really want? What is your heart saying? Any version of that.
I love that. Basic is sometimes all you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes we think it's got to be this big, epic question, but it can be simple and lead you in such epic steps. So thank you, my friend, for being here.
Thank you.
And for sharing your story
Thank
and for
you.
being you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
What is the best place for people to find you? Is there a social media platform you prefer over another, or anything like
Yeah.
that?
Ah, gosh, social media. Yeah, gotta love it. Honestly, I would say,
Or just your website, whatever one.
yeah, I would say, like, first and foremost, though, I would say if I said anything that was inspiring or intriguing, check out my podcast. Like, I definitely would say
Yes.
check that out. Otherwise, I would say Instagram probably would be the next. Like, you can
Okay.
connect with me there. Yeah.
Yeah, I highly recommend her podcast. It's amazing. I love it. You guys would love it. There's a lot of great conversations on there. I will have a link to that also. So if you need to reach out to her in any ways, please click on any of the links. If not, you can also reach out to me and I will send you the information for her. So until then, stay curious, stay empowered, and keep shining your unique light. We'll see you on the next one.